A girl is trapped on a deserted island with 5 dangerous men. Thus begins a hell-level survival game. And the only way to survive is to stay far away from this group of men who could snap at any moment. But just as her escape plan was beginning, it was violently cut short. A man ruthlessly pinned her down on the scorching beach. His icy voice crashed down, wrapped in fury. "Miss Flown, you'd better explain this clearly. What the hell is going on?" She was on the verge of tears. If she knew the answer, she wouldn't have tried to run in the first place. To explain that, we have to go back a few minutes. As a veteran summer camp instructor, she had only picked up a novel from the roadside to pass the time. Then, in a sudden accident, she was thrown into that melodramatic, dark 19-plus Western fantasy novel. Worse still, she became the vicious woman with a miserable ending in the book, Margaret Flown. She was also the second daughter of a ducal house in the Langrid Empire. In the original story, Margaret was so obsessively possessive that she wanted all 5 male leads for herself. She even tried to push the heroine off a cliff, and in the end, she was killed by the completely deranged male leads. As her memories gradually merged with Margaret's, she recalled the novel's plot. As long as she endured 1 year on this magic-sealed island, she would regain her freedom. So before then, she had to find a place to hide. She needed to stay as far away as possible from a male leads who hated her, especially the Crown Prince, Enoch Astron Langrid. But why was he here? The girl nearly broke down on the spot. Who starts at hell difficulty right away? Wait, if Enoch was here, didn't that mean this was the starting point of the novel? In the original story, the first male lead woke up on this very beach. The thought had barely crossed her mind when Enoch's brow twitched. Her heart nearly stopped. She spun around and bolted toward the forest behind her. But after only 2 steps, an iron grip suddenly seized her ankle. The sheer force slammed her hard onto the ground. The next second, a scorching body pressed heavily down on her. "Miss Flown, where exactly are you trying to run?" She went completely numb. Help! She'd been caught by the person she least wanted to meet. When she didn't answer, the hand gripping her jaw tightened. "Tell me, what is this all about?" Thinking quickly, she suddenly pointed at the sky and shouted, "What's that?" Enoch instinctively looked up. She took the chance to break free, but the layers of clothing on her body became a burden. Enoch caught her again. "Do you think I'm a joke to you?" Flown was both aggrieved and furious. "How would I know what's going on? I'm just as confused as you are." Enoch leaned in menacingly. "You expect me to believe that nonsense?" His agitation was actually easy to understand. The old Flown had been like a clingy, relentless stalker, constantly hovering around him. She had even bought a so-called love potion. It had sent him into allergic shock and nearly killed him. From that day on, Enoch had come to loathe Flown. Any one of the idiotic things Flown had done was enough to land her before a tribunal. But thanks to the power of her ducal family, she always got away unscathed. As for Enoch, though he was the Empire's crown prince, his mother had been a low-born commoner. He had the title, but in truth, no backing at all. But this really is a misunderstanding. My family may have some power, but we'd never dare kidnap the Empire's crown prince. Enoch fell silent for a moment. He muttered in a low voice. That makes some sense. Could this be Rodvan's doing? Rodvan Ast, the madman who lost the position of crown prince to him and was exiled to the far north. Seeing that he seemed persuaded, Flown shook off his hand. "Your Highness, since you've figured that out, may I take my leave now?" But the next second, he grabbed her again. She forced out a stiff smile. "Your Highness, could you let go of me first?" "Absolutely not. If I let go, won't you just run again?" Seeing that reason wasn't going to work, she began acting weak. "But it really hurts." Enoch had no intention of letting her off. "Stop pretending." Even so, the force on her wrist loosened unconsciously. The urgent thing now is figuring out where this place is. Let's head up the mountain first and look at the terrain. We need to confirm whether this is an isolated island or connected to the mainland. He wasn't wrong, but her heart sank. She clearly remembered the setting from the original story. Once the sun went down, the monsters on this island would swarm out. She quickly stopped him. "It's almost dark. If we're going to scout the area, let's wait until tomorrow morning." Enoch agreed readily. "Fine. We'll do as the lady says and go tomorrow. For now, let's search nearby and see if there's somewhere we can hide." The girl let out a sigh of relief. She hadn't expected him to be easier to talk to than she'd imagined. Then again, he'd been through war. His judgment was precise and decisive. Strangely enough, in the original story, Enoch was a ruthless man who had secured the position of crown prince by sheer force of will. But after becoming stranded on this island, his obsession with the heroine gradually drove him so mad he lost all reason. The island survival rules were very very unusual. This wasn't a conventional deserted island survival story. Modern items were scattered all over the island. But because the protagonists in the original story didn't know what they were for, most of them threw them away. That was exactly where her advantage lay. If she could make good use of those modern objects, her chances of survival would rise dramatically. She immediately decided to stick close to Enoch for now. Once they found the cabin where the protagonists had stayed in the original story and secured some supplies, she'd look for a chance to slip away. But the moment she finished making that plan, Enoch seemed to sense it and warned her, "You'd better not be thinking about running." This man was frighteningly sharp, but on second thought, compared to dealing with a whole group of men who hated her, staying with the crown prince actually seemed safer. Enoch casually picked up a branch. He swung it hard. "This'll do." Barely, but it can serve as a weapon. Floan stared at the dead branch, full of doubt. Could that thing really deal with monsters? Reality soon gave her an answer. The moment they stepped into the edge of the forest, a deafening roar erupted. Then hurried footsteps drew closer and closer. A giant wolf, as large as a lion, suddenly burst out from behind the bushes. Impossible. The original story clearly said monsters only came out at midnight. She had no time to think further. Enoch had already pulled her into his arms and attacked at the same time. The wooden stick in his hand pierced straight through the monster. The girl was stunned. He took it down with just a branch. Only then did she remember. In the original story, Enoch seemed to have some kind of trauma related to blood. As she was thinking about it, his gaze suddenly swept toward her. Her heart tightened. Before she could speak, he suddenly shoved her away. Seriously? She'd just been worried about him. But why had a monster appeared early? Could it be that the condition for them to appear wasn't just nighttime, but darkness? If that was true, then before they found a safe shelter, they could be torn apart at any moment. The color drained from her face, and her body began trembling uncontrollably. Enoch noticed everything. He thought she had simply been frightened by what happened just now. For a noble lady, this was probably her first time facing something like this. "Miss, are you all right?" He stepped forward. His tone wasn't exactly gentle, but lacked some of its earlier harshness. Floan came back to herself. "What?" Enoch suddenly reached out and brushed her cheek. "You looked like you were about to die, so I asked." The way he looked now was completely different from the way he had shoved her aside before. Floan didn't understand why he was suddenly showing concern. Had he been reminded of some injured comrade from the past? "I'm Fine. Thank you for saving me just now." Enoch gave a short response. "You do know you're still a suspect, right? Once we return to the Empire, I will investigate this thoroughly. So without my permission, you're not allowed to die." She thought, "Investigate my foot. I am innocent. Okay." Seeing her stay silent, Enoch impatiently urged, "What are you standing there for? This place is dangerous." Although Floan thought he was fierce and hard to deal with, he also gave her a strange sense of security. Before sunset, they built a temporary shelter. Enoch let her enter first, but once she was inside, he warned her coldly to keep her distance. "Stay away from me. I have no interest in sleeping beside you." The girl bristled instantly. "I was going to say the same thing. Who knows what you might do in the middle of the night?" Unfortunately, one glare from Enoch was enough to make her back down again. It was still early. Floan wasn't sleepy at all. She couldn't help breaking the silence. "Your Highness, are you thirsty? If you're thinking of running." "No, we haven't had a single drop of water since we woke up. If this keeps up, we might die of dehydration before any beast gets to us." "What trick are you trying to pull now?" Just as Enoch turned around, he saw the girl looking at him expectantly. "I'll look around nearby. Maybe I can find coconuts. I'll be back soon." That left him momentarily stunned, and he agreed without thinking. Only after she left did it occur to him. She's a noble lady. Would she even know what a coconut looks like? He got his answer moments later. The girl's voice carried a trace of excitement. Out of habit, she started explaining. "It's this fruit that grows on trees. The liquid inside can replenish water. But be careful. Overripe coconuts can cause diarrhea. If you eat one by mistake, it'll only make dehydration worse." Watching her struggle to smash the hard shell with a rock, Enoch sighed helplessly. "Get to me." The coconut split cleanly in half in his hand. He handed one half to Floan. The girl marveled. What incredible wrist strength. She dipped a finger in and tasted it first. After confirming it hadn't gone bad, she relaxed. "It's fine. You can drink it all day long." Enoch had been quietly observing her. The girl before him was completely different from the spoiled, arrogant, high and mighty Duke's daughter in his memory. She could identify wild fruit that would quench thirst, avoid poisonous plants with caution, and even knew how to use the terrain to avoid danger. Those survival skills were not things a pampered, noble lady should possess. Was this really the same Floan who used to do nothing but follow him around, her head filled with foolish adoration? It was as if she had been replaced by another soul. The thought had barely surfaced when Floan's voice pulled him back to reality. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Enoch snapped back to himself and stared at her. "Miss, you seem like a completely different person." The girl's mind went blank instantly. She forced herself to stay calm and hurriedly organized her words. "People always change under extreme circumstances, don't they?" She had to deny it. He already regarded her as a kidnapping suspect. If he found out she wasn't the real Margaret, he might decide she was behind all this. Enoch's gaze sharpened. That kind of change is extremely rare. Still, given your current judgment and adaptability, I suppose it's not impossible. He stood up and dusted himself off. "Come on, let's head back first." Floan's heart slowly settled. Thank goodness she'd managed to get through that. In the cramped shelter, the two sat back to back, each clearly able to hear the other's breathing. Occasionally, her back brushed against the solid warmth behind her, making sleep even harder to come by. Clearly, Enoch wasn't sleepy either. He took the initiative to bring up what had happened earlier. That wasn't an ordinary beast. It had the aura of a monster. The strange thing is, when I tried to summon Sword Aura just now, I found I couldn't use it. That matched what she had expected. Whether it was magic or divine power, both were sealed here. They could only survive by relying on their own strength. Still, with Enoch's monstrous strength, she probably didn't need to worry for now. Enoch sighed again. "You probably don't understand any of that, do you, miss? Why am I even telling you this?" Floan silently clenched her fist. "Honestly, this guy, but who could have done this? And why you and me in particular, miss?" She had no choice but to clarify again. "If I really wanted to kidnap your Highness, I wouldn't bring you somewhere like this. I'd lock you away in some secluded estate instead." Of course, I absolutely never had such thoughts. Afraid she'd only make things sound worse, she hurriedly changed the subject. "By the way, what were you doing before you came here, Your Highness?" "Handling a backlog of official documents. And the day before that, did you meet anyone suspicious?" "What? Are you interrogating me now?" The girl answered righteously. "That's right, I am." To her surprise, he didn't argue and simply answered, "I hadn't stepped outside the palace for the past month. I've been dealing with year-end accounting the entire time." There was a trace of fatigue in Enoch's voice. This guy really was a workaholic. She was still stunned when Enoch asked back, "And you, miss? What were you doing before the accident?" Floan couldn't help laughing. There was no way she could say that the original Margaret had been daydreaming over his floral scent. "At the time, I was enjoying afternoon tea at a salon. I love socializing. I've met too many people lately. I honestly can't remember anyone suspicious." Enoch wore an unfortunate expression and ended the questioning. "All right, that's enough interrogation. Get some proper rest and save your strength today. Tomorrow we need to climb the mountain and figure out where we are." The wind at night still carried a lingering heat. She casually brushed the loose hair from the back of her neck. Enoch's face instantly flushed red, but he immediately threatened her viciously again. "If you dare cross this line, I'll throw you straight into the sea." Floan was driven crazy by his mood swings. "Even if you begged me, I wouldn't come over." According to the original setting, besides her and Enoch, the other protagonists were also scattered across the island at this moment. The Prince of the Kingdom of Hesperia, the Captain of the Imperial Guard, the Saintess blessed with holy light, the mysterious Archbishop, and the great Mage Kate. In the original story, after arguing with Margaret, Enoch was supposed to run into the Saintess Joanna, but the plot had already gone off the rails from the very start. What unsettled her even more was that she had never finished the novel. If things had diverged this much already, the cabin they were supposed to find might no longer be safe either. Even so, she still had to find that cabin, get the essential survival items, and then search for the bunker the heroine discovered. But in the original story, the moment the heroine found the bunker, they were sent back. Staring at the twinkling night sky, Floan couldn't help letting her thoughts run wild. Maybe all of this was just a dream. Maybe when she woke up tomorrow, she'd be lying in her own familiar bed, and all of this would turn out to have been nothing but a dream. Though if that were true, not getting to meet the great maid she'd been dying to see would be a little disappointing. Deep within the island, a pack of beasts roared past. A disheveled figure suddenly burst out of the thick bushes. The man was furious. Looking at the unfamiliar jungle, he couldn't help cursing. "Damn it, where the hell is this place?" She pulled her skirt up and tied it around the tops of her thighs, then efficiently tied back her long hair. She was preparing to catch fish in the sea because the girl had transmigrated into She had to survive a full year before there would be any chance of leaving. During that time, she not only had to guard against the increasingly unstable male leads around her, but also avoid the monsters in the forest. Floan woke early, freezing. She muttered that next time she needed to build a fire before sleeping, but the moment she sat up, she realized Enoch's coat was draped over her. Awake? A voice sounded from behind her. She turned around. The man's back was straight and his eyes were clear. There wasn't the slightest trace of drowsiness in him. You didn't sleep at all last night? Enoch looked away and didn't answer. She could more or less guess it had been for watch duty, but anger still rose in her chest. Wearing yourself out like this in the wild is practically asking to die, especially when we're climbing to the summit today. Enoch's temples throbbed from her nagging before he finally forced out a sentence. I still wasn't sure whether you were worthy of trust. Mississippi Floan stared at him, half laughing and half exasperated. He says he doesn't trust her, yet he still took off his coat and covered her with it. This kind of contradictory person was a first for her. At that moment, her stomach growled at the worst possible time. Floan blushed in embarrassment. Looks like they'd have to look for some wild fruit in the mountains first. But the moment they reached the summit, her heart plunged straight to the bottom. This really was the novel she had read. Enoch instantly became irritable. Damn it, I still have no idea where we are. Who exactly brought us here? Floan felt despair too. There was still a full year before the door would open. Could she survive in the hands of these gradually maddening male leads? She should have found a chance to run away earlier. But climbing the mountain had drained her strength, and besides, when she looked at Enoch, she knew he'd be in danger too if this kept up. Floan took a deep breath and held out her hand toward him. Now that we know this is an island, let's head back down. We have to survive and get back alive. She knew very well that Enoch hadn't had any salt since yesterday, nor had he eaten a single bite. No matter how battle-hardened he was, his judgment had to be at rock bottom by now. Carefully choosing her words, she said, before it gets dark and the monsters come out, we need to go down the mountain. Just as she thought he would coldly refuse. Enoch took her hand. What surprised her even more was that he quietly said, "Thank you." Her stomach let out another loud protest, and Floan's cheeks instantly turned bright red. Enoch turned his head away. I didn't hear anything. It seemed they needed to solve the food problem first. The man looked baffled. Miss, are you serious? Of course. Floan tied up her long hair, then bent down and rolled up her skirt. That flash of dazzling white made Enoch's face explode red. He whirled around at once. The tips of his ears is so red they looked ready to drip blood. Until I get back, please take care of the fire. The man gave a quiet acknowledgement. Floan shot him a sideways look. Was that really necessary? Hadn't he ever seen a woman's legs before? She picked up the fish spear she'd just made and strode toward the shore. Thankfully, there were no monsters in the sea. If she wanted enough nutrition, hunting was the only way. First, she found shellfish trapped between the rocks and crushed them with a stone, scattering the pieces into the sea as bait. After that, all she had to do was focus and wait for prey to appear. Now, she thrust the fish spear out fiercely. Got it. Looking at the wriggling fish on the tip of the spear, she couldn't believe she'd succeeded on the first try. Maybe she was naturally suited for wilderness survival. She wasn't on Bear Grylls' level or anything, but there was still an indescribable sense of accomplishment. Then a voice sounded behind her. She turned and saw that Enoch had come to the shore at some point. How long had he been watching? Their eyes met, and an awkward silence spread through the air. Another fish. Fine. She'd just pretend she hadn't seen him. Enoch quickly got the fire going. His opinion of Floan had completely changed. Amazing. I never expected you to know how to clean fish, Mississippi. Anyone who likes fishing usually does, Floan answered casually. The moment the words left her mouth, she froze. That wasn't right. In the original story, the heroine couldn't even stand the smell of fish. She just waited for the male leads to hand her cooked fish and meat. So why had she ended up doing everything herself? She had volunteered, sure, but a strange feeling of grievance still rose in her heart. Enoch grew uneasy under her stare. Why are you looking at me like that? Floan sighed. It's nothing. She began grilling the prepared fish. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. Enoch had actually leaned in close. Really nothing? The handsome face looming before her made her breathing hitch. The next second, a warm hand gently settled on top of her head. Sorry, did I scare you? I just thought it was interesting, so I kept looking at you. Next time, leave it to me. He took over the grilling. Floan covered her burning cheeks, her heart practically jumping into her throat. No. She had to pull herself together. She couldn't let him charm her. The fish was cooked very quickly. Its golden, crispy skin sizzled with oil. She picked up the larger one and handed it to Enoch. Here, this one's for you. But Enoch didn't take it. Instead, he picked up the smaller one. This isn't the Langrid Empire, so there's no need for that kind of deference. From now on, put yourself first. It's natural to feel uneasy in an unfamiliar place. I understand that too, but I'll find a way to help you escape alive, so don't worry too much. But this kindness didn't make her happy. Because she'd read the original story, she understood even better how dangerous this place was. Whether Enoch would even make it off this island alive was uncertain. He suddenly stood. Once I get the chance, I'll send you away first. Then you can go find help. The girl froze. What? Enoch's gaze turned cold. Did you think I was just going to let you go like that? Didn't I tell you? Miss, you must stay by my side. Only when I send you away may you leave me. Goosebumps rose all over Floan's skin. If someone clueless heard that, they might mistake it for a confession from a devoted male lead. But in reality, it was dangerous. Just then, a coat still carrying body heat was draped over her shoulders. It was Enoch's. Put it on. I'm only giving it to you because I'm too hot. Don't thank me. Floan tugged the coat closer around herself, right? There was no way he had suddenly become kind to Margaret overnight. But at least tonight, she could sleep soundly again. When the girl said she was leaving, Enoch instantly snapped. The noble lady he thought needed him in order to survive actually wanted to part ways with him without the slightest hesitation, simply because they disagreed. He insisted on staying by the shore and waiting for rescue, while Floan, knowing the door wouldn't open for another year, decided to search inside the island for supplies. After all, this dress was seriously interfering with her movements. But she had no way to explain that she knew the future. If she said too much, Enoch's expression darkened in an instant, but the girl didn't notice at all. Thank you for saving me from the monster. What? But the girl didn't even notice. Thank you for saving me from the monster. The time I spent with you, Your Highness, really did comfort me. So this is goodbye. Wait. Enoch stepped forward to block her. I warned you clearly yesterday, didn't I? Only when I send you away can you leave my side. Floan retorted, but our opinions are completely different right now. I'm only making the most reasonable choice. As far as she knew, the only danger on the island at this stage was the monsters. As long as she found somewhere to hide before sunset, she could get through it. The urgent thing was finding the supply cabin or the bunker. Only then could she accurately determine when the door would open. And besides, she wanted to investigate why she had transmigrated and become Margaret. Enoch suppressed the emotions in his chest. Miss Floan, do you really consider charging into the island alone, basically courting death, a reasonable choice? The girl suddenly rose on tiptoe and leaned closer. Are you worried about me, Your Highness? Afraid I'll get hurt? Actually, she leaned more toward the idea that Enoch simply wanted to keep her under surveillance. Don't worry, I'm much harder to kill than I look. You've seen it these past few days, so maybe you should worry more about yourself. Her words were cut off. We'll go together. I'll accompany you into the island, but I'll continue looking for a way to escape this place. Floan was stunned. That man who had hated Margaret most was actually willing to travel with her. Could it be that after these days of close contact, his disgust toward this body had lessened, even if only a little? She curved her lips into a smile. Good. If she could use this chance to gain Enoch's trust, perhaps her future could still change. Even with someone clearing the path ahead, moving through the terrain was still difficult for her because of her clothes. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. Look there. There are usually caves below cliffs. The route there might be dangerous, but there couldn't be a better place to stay. Enoch looked skeptical. They teach things like that in a ducal household? Her heart skipped. She brushed it off casually. I received all kinds of education in my family. Looks like the Duke treasures you very much if he'd even let you receive such dangerous training. Mississippi. I am impressed. Floan was baffled. Why was he suddenly angry? Anyway, it looked like it was about to rain. Let's hurry there. Before she could finish speaking, her skirt got viciously snagged on a branch. She lost her balance and fell hard to the ground. Miss Floan, Enoch hurried over and reached out to help her. Are you all right? Unfortunately, a piercing pain shot through her ankle. She had sprained it. Enoch crouched to examine it. It's bad. I'm afraid you won't be able to walk for now. Excuse me. Before Floan could react, he bent down and swept her up into his arms. The girl instantly stiffened and struggled instinctively. Put me down. Instead, Enoch tightened his arms around her. If we want to reach the cave before it rains, this is the fastest way. If you don't want to fall, hold on tight. Floan had no choice but to wrap her arms around him obediently. But this was way too close. The deeper they went into the forest, the quieter it became around them. Occasionally, a bird would sweep overhead. She secretly raised her eyes to look at him. Was this what it meant to be a male lead from a novel? He made people feel strangely safe, and it seemed like he bore her a trace of goodwill now. She only hoped that after he met the original heroine, that goodwill wouldn't disappear. She might as well use this chance to increase his trust in her. Your Highness, you've seen it yourself. Ever since I came to this island, I really have changed. Just think of it as me being reborn. I won't act like before anymore. So, Enoch suddenly stopped walking. It's true. When I talk to you now, I don't feel as annoyed as I used to. But I will never develop any feelings for you, miss. What I'm doing now is simply fulfilling a gentleman's duty. Please don't entertain any expectations you shouldn't. It will only cause trouble later. Flone's heart slowly sank, but soon she had no room to think about that. Something was rushing toward them at terrifying speed. The sun hadn't even set yet. The monsters shouldn't have appeared. Acting almost on instinct, she shoved Enoch away. Your Highness, watch out. The two of them dodged the ambush, but she fell right in front of the monster. Before she could react, a thick tree trunk came whistling through the air, slamming hard into the monster. Enoch charged forward and engaged it in a fierce struggle. He shouted, "Miss Flown, run." The girl instantly calmed down. He couldn't die, and she absolutely couldn't become Enoch's burden. She started climbing the nearest tree, but reality never indulged her wishes. A pursuing monster clamped its jaws onto the hem of her skirt. This damn dress again. The moment Enoch saw it, he immediately threw off the monster fighting him and ran at her like a madman. But it was too late. She was so unwilling to accept it. Why did this kind of thing always happen to her? At the very last moment before consciousness faded, all she heard was Enoch's heart-wrenching scream. Margaret. Then she remembered. Before transmigrating, the original Margaret had proposed to Enoch. He had rejected her mercilessly. Enraged and humiliated, the noble lady had publicly mocked him as a bastard of impure blood. Words that vicious. No wonder he hated Margaret to the bone. From the very start, she never should have expected anything from Enoch. She should have shaken him off and gone looking for the bunker on her own. And yet she'd thought their relationship had improved a little after spending these days together. Where consciousness returned, the first thing she smelled was a sharp stench of blood. Flown slowly opened her eyes, and what entered her vision was the ground littered with monster corpses. Enoch stood not far away with his back to her. Enduring the pain, she shakily got to her feet, wanting to ask if he was all right, if he was hurt. But the moment she saw his hand, she froze. Bright red drops of blood were continuously dripping from it. She suddenly remembered the setting from the original story. Enoch's war trauma was that once he saw human blood, he would lose control and go berserk. In that state, he would recklessly overdraw his body until he collapsed from exhaustion. So she had to find a way to stop him immediately. In order to stop the male lead from going berserk, the girl not only knocked him unconscious with a stick, but tied him up tightly as well. So when Enoch woke up, he found his hands and feet bound fast. Not long before, Flown had moved him into the cave. Under her clothes were large scratches left by the monster, and blood was still seeping from the wounds. Could the monster's claws be poisonous? She tore her skirt, made a crude bandage for him, and then thought that perhaps his berserk state hadn't ended yet. Just in case, she tied him up, and that led to the current situation. Enoch sat up warily. "What'd you do to me? Untie me at once." She thought to herself, this guy's temper really is awful. But not a ripple showed on her face. "You still can't move. Your wounds will split open and get worse." Enoch struggled violently. "Don't move." She instinctively spoke the words, and the man froze on the spot. Enoch remained kneeling there, like a giant dog that had been immobilized. Flown froze too. That actually worked to calm him down? In the original story, she'd never seen the male lead react like this. Enoch awkwardly turned his gaze aside. "Why can't my body move? It's all right now." She moved closer and gently stroked Enoch's head. Her warm voice wrapped around him like a blanket, gradually soothing the man's taut nerves. His eyelids grew heavy. With a thud, he collapsed to the ground. The girl finally let out a breath. If anything had gone wrong just now, he probably would have ended up like those vague things from earlier in the day. In the original story, whenever the male lead went berserk, it was always the heroine who calmed him down. When he anxiously clawed at his hair, it was a romantic bonding scene for the heroine, Joanna. But for her, it was a matter of life and death. That night, because his wound had become infected, Enoch developed a high fever. Though he regained his senses by morning, he still looked terrible. They couldn't keep dragging this out. I'm going to look for some herbs and food. I'll be back soon. Enoch sat there blankly, watching her leave. Only after the girl's figure disappeared did he remember he was still tied up. He sighed. At least untie me before you go. Meanwhile, Floan quickly found several herbs that could stop bleeding and reduce inflammation. She was just planning to hurry back before dark when the crisp snap of dead branches suddenly came from behind her. A monster? No, it was noon when the sunlight was strongest. Monsters couldn't appear now. Then was it a human? Her heart tightened, and she immediately turned and ran in the opposite direction. On this deserted island, aside from the heroine Joanna, there were only 5 male leads. Other than Joanna, who was kind to everyone, which of the others didn't regard her with hostility? Dealing with Enoch alone had already been troublesome enough. A male voice came from behind her, chilling her to the bone. What? So there really is someone here? The second male lead from the original story blocked her path. Silver hair, red eyes, and his signature single earring. Kiden Blanc. She almost instinctively changed direction and ran. If Enoch was the person who hated Margaret the most, then Caden was the one who posed the greatest threat to her. Because in the original plot, Margaret ultimately died at Caden's hands. Caden was the second son of Marquis Rohade's family. When he was young, he had been abducted by the temple and turned into the victim of inhuman experiments. And for the sake of profit, the Marquis had actually struck a filthy deal with the temple and buried the whole matter. That sunless past became the fuse that ignited his madness. From then on, Caden came to hate both his family and the temple. Any research led by the temple or experiments funded by noble houses he would destroy by any means necessary. And unfortunately, the original Margaret had once poured a fortune into sponsoring the temple's research. Suddenly, someone seized her wrist. The tremendous force made Floan stumble and pitch forward. Back then, Caden had once gone to the Floan ducal estate and demanded that the research be stopped. But Margaret had insisted on pushing the experiments forward. Because of that, he had come to loathe the Floan family. So, she had to stay far away from him. Let go of me. She shoved him away, only for something to strike the corner of her eye. She cried out in pain. The man looked tense. Are you okay? Floan looked over. It was the pendant hanging from Caden's robe. She bent down and picked it up. It was heavier than she had expected. Wait. Caden suddenly reached out and cupped her face. Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before? The girl's heart leaped in her throat, terrified he might recognize her. But Caden suddenly let go, pulled her to her feet, and said, Sorry, did I scare you? Try to understand. If you suddenly run into a noble lady out in the wilderness, anyone would find that suspicious. According to the original setting, after Caden escaped from the temple, he had to rely on his earring to regulate his unstable magic. But after coming to this island, the earring was accidentally damaged, and his magic had been out of control ever since. He often came down with sudden fevers, and could barely control his emotions. The red glow in his eyes flickered. But why did you run away? Are you mute? Strange. You clearly screamed just now. Floan pressed her lips together and muttered softly. Caden tilted his head and leaned closer. What did you say? She took a small step back, her eyes full of wariness. What do you want? The man suddenly widened his eyes and blurted out, You're beautiful. Floan was completely thrown by that sudden turn. Was this man insane? Let go of me first. No, since we've met, why not get to know each other better? Who would want to get close to someone as dangerous as you? But Caden ignored her resistance. Tilting his head, brows knitted, he looked like he was trying to remember something. But no matter how I look at you, you really resemble someone I know. I remember. You wouldn't happen to be Miss Margaret Floan, that lunatic from the Langrid Empire, would you? The girl had still run into the man she most wanted to avoid. Worse, he was not only intensely interested in her, he had seen through her identity at a glance. You wouldn't happen to be Miss Margaret Floan, that lunatic from the Langrid Empire, would you? She was inwardly fuming. You're the lunatic. Your whole family is. Seeing that she remained silent, Caden leisurely lifted a strand of her long hair again. She had this color too, I think. Floan finally snapped. She slapped his hand away. You call me a lunatic? Don't you think that's incredibly rude to say in front of a lady? Caden blinked, staring at her darkly. Floan's heart skipped. She told herself it was fine. Back when Caden had gone to the Floan estate to request that the funding for the experiments be stopped, their meeting had lasted only an instant. After all this time, there was no way he could recognize that she was Margaret. Sure enough, he didn't pursue the subject any further. Then who are you? He asked, taking a step closer. Caden Blanc Ruada. Do you know me? She hurriedly shook her head. Is that so? But you really aren't. Miss Margaret Flown? I said I'm not. That's good. The smile on his face didn't fade, but the air around him dropped to freezing in an instant. Because I hate that woman very much. A bone-deep killing intent rushed at her. The blood in Floan's body nearly froze, and her heart pounded wildly. This felt completely different from facing Enoch. Caden really would kill her. Then Caden suddenly looked up at the sky, then lowered his head again, as if he were catching something in the air. At last, his gaze locked firmly onto her. In the next second, Caden yanked her into his arms. Floan bristled instantly. "What are you doing?" Caden's cheeks were flushed with an unhealthy red. He buried his face near her neck and shoulder and inhaled greedily, sounding confused. "Strange. You smell sweet." His warm breath brushed the back of her neck, and every hair on Floan's body stood on end. But she immediately sensed it keenly. He was distracted. "Now!" She raised her leg and kicked him hard. He let out a cry. He dropped to one knee in a miserable heap. Floan didn't dare waste a second and bolted. Even if Caden didn't kill her now, one day he would. A steep cliff lay ahead, but she didn't hesitate in the slightest. She grabbed a vine hanging from above and swung across in one leap. By then, Caden had already caught up, his fingers barely grazing the tips of her hair. She landed steadily and glanced back. There was only one thought in her mind. She absolutely refused to live in constant fear of dying at any moment. Enoch alone had already been enough to wear her down. Caden stared after her in utter disbelief. Was that really the delicate, noble lady? Floan only stopped when she could run no farther. She hadn't noticed before, but she had somehow brought this along. She looked at the sky. It was almost time for the monsters to come out. There was no time to get back to the cave and find Enoch. She needed to worry about herself first. Fortunately, there was a place nearby where she could hide. She decided to stay there for the night and return at dawn. Suddenly, her foot kicked something. She picked it up and found that it was a first aid kit. Floan was so overwhelmed, she almost cried. Hope for survival surged up in her chest. Iodine, fever medicine, painkillers, everything was there. Maybe it was because she had inherited Margaret's memories, but it took her a little longer than usual to recognize the writing. But that didn't matter. With this, she could treat Enoch's wound. Just then, a deafening roar suddenly came from behind her. Floan's whole body went rigid. She scrambled on all fours and hid beneath a stone slab. The monsters had come this early? Footsteps drew closer and closer, then stopped outside the stone slab. It seemed to be searching for something. Holding her breath, she peered outside. In that instant, her blood turned to ice. The thing had stopped in front of the slab. Its legs were twice as thick as an adult man's thighs, and its whole body was covered in dense brown-black fur. It was definitely not human. As if it had sensed something, the monster suddenly turned and crouched before the stone slab. Damn it, had it found her? If this kept up, she would absolutely be eaten alive. In her panic, Enoch's face suddenly appeared in her mind. Floan couldn't help thinking that it would be nice if he were here. At the critical moment, a loud banging sound suddenly rang out in the distance. The monster froze. Then it turned and headed toward the sound. Floan collapsed where she was, trembling uncontrollably. She clamped both hands over her mouth to keep any sound from escaping. That night, she fell asleep with fear and vigilance as her pillow. It was the first time she had missed Enoch. What in the world had that monster been? The original story had described the appearance and evolution of monsters, but nothing so bizarre had ever appeared. Thinking carefully, even the wolf-shaped monsters she had met later had been different from the first ones. Why did it feel like the difficulty level had increased? Could she really leave this island alive? When Floan returned to the cave, she discovered that it was completely empty. Her heart sank. Although she had thought more than once about running away, she had never expected Enoch to leave first. Had he run into Joanna? Her hand tightened unconsciously. Then again, if he had met Joanna, he would definitely abandon her without hesitation. That was the kind of person he was. Since he wasn't here, she had no reason to stay any longer. She would follow her original plan and look for the cabin and the bunker. A medicine bottle rolled forward across the ground and suddenly stopped. Floan looked up and saw Enoch standing at the entrance of the cave. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling violently, his voice carrying an indescribable urgency. "Margaret," she froze, then after a long pause managed to squeeze out, I thought you had left. It looks like your body is fine now. That's great." But unexpectedly, the man's eyes suddenly sharpened. Floan was baffled. Why was he glaring at her again? Had something happened while she was away? Or did he think she had tried to run? Wait, I told you I was going to look for herbs. I couldn't bring any back, but I found a first aid kit. It's basically God-tier equipment. The moment she finished speaking, she remembered Enoch wouldn't understand what God-tier meant, so she hurriedly added, "Anyway, if you're injured, this can immediately—" Her words cut off abruptly. Enoch suddenly grabbed her by both shoulders, his voice trembling faintly. "Don't do this again. I won't get hurt anymore. So don't do something this dangerous for me again." Caden's appearance had thrown Enoch into a nightmare, and after parting from the girl this time, he had finally recognized his own feelings. He, who had never believed in gods, prayed for the first time in his life that the girl he had once despised to the marrow of his bones would be safe and unharmed. When Enoch regained full awareness, the sunset had already reddened the sky. He looked around blankly, and only then realized he was in a cave. Sharp pain throbbed from the wound on his right arm. He recognized the cloth tied there as a piece of Margaret's dress. He hadn't expected her to know how to treat wounds. That surprise soon turned to worry. Her voice was nowhere to be found. He vaguely remembered the girl saying she was going to search for herbs, though their time here had been short. After spending the past few days on the island with her, he had learned a few things about it. For example, the monsters that attacked them did not come out during the day. They only appeared when dusk fell. That meant it was dangerous outside now. As Enoch ran through the forest, even he himself couldn't tell where this urgency was coming from. Under normal circumstances, he would never have risked his life for Floan like this. He clearly hated her, but everything Floan had done for him kept surging through his mind. Without her, could he have survived until now? Those cruel, poisonous words he had said now branded themselves on his heart, one by one. How could he have been so awful? Floan had awakened in a strange, deserted island. How frightened must she have been? Yet he hadn't shown the slightest consideration. He had only used the harshest words to hurt her. That entire night, Enoch prayed earnestly, hoping Margaret would live, hoping she would be safe. And now, that person had returned to his side. Unlike Enoch's complicated emotions, the girl looked utterly confused. "Your Highness, what are you?" The man corrected her. "Enoch." He leaned closer and lightly pressed his forehead to hers. There was no way he would be this gentle to Margaret. "I heard people can change when they're pushed into extreme situations. Is that why he's like this?" There was no way he would treat Margaret this kindly. Did people really change under extreme conditions? Was that why? Then he suddenly cupped her face, his voice laced with barely restrained anger. "Who hurt you?" Floan felt uncomfortable all over. She slapped his hand away. "It's nothing, just a minor injury." "How rare. Your Highness is speaking to me like this. Has her fever not gone down yet?" She deliberately mimicked his old tone. "I will never feel any affection for a young lady like you. So I hope you won't harbor any pointless expectations. It will only make things troublesome for both of us." Enoch's heart lurched violently. He lowered his head and knelt there silently, his bangs hiding the emotions surging in his eyes. The girl shook her head. Had those words really struck him that hard? But this wasn't the time to go soft on him. She stood up. "I am starving. I'm seriously about to die of hunger. Let's go hunting first. Of course, I'll treat your wound before that." Enoch looked at her fixedly, and in the end only said, "Thank you." Floan took out the medicine. "First we disinfect it. It'll hurt, but bear with it." It was more troublesome than she'd imagined. Fortunately, the wound hadn't grown more inflamed. "There, done." Enoch looked slightly surprised. She was unexpectedly skilled at bandaging. As Floan put away the medicine kit, she said, "You can move around now." He asked doubtfully, "How do you know what those medicines are?" The girl's heart skipped a beat. How was she supposed to explain this? "You know the eastern continent across the sea, right? That's their language. I learned a little of it before." Enoch's eyes were still suspicious, but he didn't press further. "I see." The girl let out a quiet sigh of relief. Fortunately, she had managed to muddle through using Margaret's memories. Still, why had the author added something like modern first aid supplies to the setting? Enoch spoke again. "About that, aren't you going to tell me what happened to the injury on your face?" Floan thought about it. There seemed to be no need to hide the fact that she had met Caden, since the two of them would meet eventually anyway. As for what exactly happened, well, at the time he was pressing me down. A sharp crack sounded. The only thing she saw was the stone in Enoch's hand being crushed into powder. "Do you know who that man was?" I picked up the thing that hit me in the face. The stone in Enoch's hand had been crushed into powder. "Do you know who that man was?" I picked up the thing that hit my face. Enoch took a closer look. This is the emblem of the magic tower. The girl thought to herself that, sure enough, he had recognized it immediately. But there was something else she was more worried about. Your Highness, if you see blood again, will you still lose control? Enoch's body stiffened. Well, Flown didn't miss his panic. I know that's a very blunt question, but if we're going to keep acting together, I need to know these things. Enoch let out a long sigh. It could still happen. I only developed this condition after coming back from the battlefield. Since there's no blood in the palace, I'm usually fine. The girl pressed on. Then don't you know any way to control it? His gaze started to dart away, as if it were difficult for him to say. Flown remembered what had happened not long before. At that time, his violent agitation had calmed down. Clearly, there was some way to stop an episode. But what was it? Just then, the man finally spoke. Margaret, that day you told me to stop. I think. Only your words work on me. Not long ago, under Flown's questioning, Enoch had finally revealed the way to stop him from going berserk. Because of his status, whether it was during childhood quarrels with his brothers or when he lost control on the battlefield, no one had ever told him to stop or to stand down. Maybe what I need is simply someone who can restrain me. I told you before this was a post-war after effect. The memories of battle at Rome Horizon were too brutal. As soon as I see blood, I lose control. As he said this, he actually cut open his own palm. Flown's heart clenched, but his expression remained normal. A minor wound like this is fine. The girl let out a breath. In an instant, she understood why. Before Enoch had become crown prince, no one had ever dared help him, let alone comfort him. If there really is some spell that can stop me when I go mad, then it's probably those words you said back then. In the original story, Joanna could only barely suppress his madness through physical intimacy, but that couldn't cure the problem at its root. No, from the beginning, who would have guessed that a man as powerful as him would actually long to be controlled? As long as there's a way, that's enough. Flown instructed him seriously. From now on, whenever we're in a situation where there might be bloodshed, you must avoid it immediately. Enoch obediently nodded and apologized. By the way, which medicine did you put on the wound? This one. Enoch took it, squeezed him onto his fingertip, and came closer. Flown instinctively stepped back, but the more she retreated, the closer Enoch came. I think this needs a little medicine too. He gently applied the ointment to the cut at the corner of her eye. What else did that man do to you? I already told you. I kicked him and ran away. Then I got lost and hid in the woods until dawn. The anxiety hanging over Enoch finally eased. Until we escape this island, don't go off alone again. That was already the plan, she answered. But inwardly, she thought that now that she had already encountered Caden, staying by Enoch's side alone could never make her feel safe. She had to find a bunker as soon as possible. Unfortunately, after days of running herself ragged, she still fell ill. She hadn't expected stomach trouble. Sure enough, no matter how troublesome it was, she still had to drink filtered, boiled water. Fortunately, her petticoat was pure cotton and could barely be used as a filter. What surprised her was that Enoch, who had always been arrogant and unruly, stayed by her side and took care of her the whole time. If events didn't unfold like they had in the original story, perhaps she wouldn't need to run away from Enoch after all. But then another thought occurred to her. What if they met the heroine later? If Enoch turned into the man from the original plot, then wouldn't all of her effort have been for nothing? Hopefully she could find the bunker before that. Didn't I tell you to rest more? A familiar voice sounded behind her. The girl blinked. But people have to eat to stay alive. The man shook his head helplessly. His tone softened a little. Fine, have it your way. Let's head back and eat first. But as they walked, Enoch suddenly stopped. The girl clutched her forehead where she had bumped into him and was just about to get angry. We blocked her. Following Enoch's gaze, she saw someone lying ahead. It was actually Caden, the man she had met not long ago. Flown's startled expression in that instant was caught perfectly by Enoch. He immediately guessed this was the man who had hurt her and moved at once to teach him a lesson. Wait, Flown hurriedly blocked his way. Enoch looked puzzled. Margaret. But she had no time to care about that. She turned to check whether the man was still alive. Sure enough, it was Caden. Enoch stepped forward. He's the one who hurt you? Flown was also somewhat surprised. She had clearly shaken him off. Had he gotten lost? Enoch's tone suddenly turned cold. We should tie him up. He's definitely dangerous. Flown motioned for him to lower his voice. It'll be dark soon. Before sunset, we need to, before she could finish. A sharp pain shot through her wrist. Caden had grabbed her even while unconscious. Enoch rushed over in alarm. Are you okay? I'm Fina. It just startled me. Let's take it back first. Flown tried to pry Caden's hand open. but his grip was like iron and didn't budge at all. Enoch stepped forward. "I'll do it." The next second, he had separated their hands. The only issue was that the hand gripping Caden looked a little too much like personal revenge. "Enoch, thank you." Her words were interrupted. "He left marks on you." Enoch's tone was icy to the extreme. He yanked her in front of him, killing intent surging around him. "Do you want me to kill this bastard?" "Wait, absolutely not. Why would you kill him? It's just a mark on my wrist." Floan grabbed him tightly, so anxious she was nearly shouting. "Enoch, you have to endure it. You have to keep yourself under control." Her desperate attempt to stop him not only kept him from getting angrier, it even made him laugh. He crouched on the ground, laughing so hard his whole body shook. "Got it, since that's what you want." But this guy seems to be the Archmage Caden. He's unpleasant to look at, but a mage's knowledge might come in handy. Let's move our things over first, then come back for him. But once we're back, we tie him up. What do you think? Floan was slightly surprised. Enoch was actually asking for her opinion now. It seemed his trust in her had risen quite a bit. But just as the thought surfaced, the man's expression darkened. "If you disagree, I'll just throw him away, right?" She had overthought it. Floan dusted off her skirt. "Don't worry. I agree with you too. Let's tie him up now." What she hadn't expected was this. Caden's injuries were extremely severe. Where on earth had he ended up like this? Floan suddenly remembered the huge crashing sound that had echoed through the forest that day. Had he caused that? They'd ask him when he woke up. Thinking this, she looked at Enoch. "He's hurt too badly. You absolutely must not look at this." Enoch's whole body was trembling, his features twisted by the effort of extreme restraint. He gritted his teeth, voice hoarse. "Looks like you'll have to tie me up too." Damn, almost by instinct, the girl kicked him over hard. "Enoch, stop." His face instantly flushed red, but he really did stay where he was without moving an inch. Even the fierceness had drained from his voice, leaving only a trace of pleading that was almost humble. "Margaret, let me go." Only at that moment did the girl finally confirm that this method really worked. Otherwise, with Enoch's monstrous strength, pushing her away would have taken no more than a flick of his fingers. But being pinned down by her had made him obedient. She ordered Enoch to stop once more. In the next instant, the man quietly fainted. Floan tied him up as fast as she could, thinking that fortunately nothing serious had happened. But when her gaze swept over the two large men lying on the ground, a wave of exasperation instantly rose in her chest. Seriously, how had these people ever survived in the original story? No time for that now. Treating the wounds came first. Not long after, Enoch woke up. Floan crouched before him, a trace of dissatisfaction in her lovely eyes. "Are you okay?" As she spoke, she reached out and untied him. The man spoke hoarsely. "I'm too ashamed to face you. How are the wounds?" Floan shrugged. "I disinfected Caden's injuries and used a hemostatic. You should be fine." "No." Enoch suddenly raised a hand and gently touched her cheek with his fingertips. "Not that, mage. I mean you." The sudden intimacy made her whole body stiffen. What could possibly be wrong with me? Enoch's fingertips curled slightly, and then his tone suddenly shifted. "If you want that man gone, just say the word." "Anytime." Floan looked at him speechlessly. "You're acting up again." The man raised an eyebrow. If only it were that simple. The girl let out a long sigh. If this kept up, she was going to go crazy too sooner or later. The two of them spent the whole night beside the unconscious Caden. His temperature stayed frighteningly high. Could he, like the monster that had attacked Enoch, have been poisoned too? Even by the next day, he still hadn't woken up. Fortunately, his breathing was less labored. They decided to scout the nearby area first. But the deeper into the dense forest they went, the hotter Floan felt. In her memory, the bunker and the cabin were located beneath a huge mountain and atop a steep cliff, respectively. The last time she had climbed to the mountain peak, she had observed that the island had 3 huge mountains. If this mountain held neither bunker nor cabin, they'd have to try their luck at the other 2. Maybe it was just the heat, but she began to feel dizzy. One brief lapse of attention, and her foot caught on a dead branch, sending her stumbling. Fortunately, Enoch wrapped an arm around her in time. "Margaret, be careful." But the girl's attention was drawn to the scars on his arm. Had he gotten those on the battlefield? "Margaret?" Enoch suddenly spoke. She sprang away from him as if shocked. Enoch looked confused. "Are you okay?" "Why, yes, I'm fine. It's just too hot." She internally berated herself. No matter how hot it was, she couldn't go around touching someone carelessly. But in the next second, her body suddenly lifted off the ground. Enoch had picked her up in his arms. She instantly panicked. "Put me down." But the man simply continued walking forward. If this keeps up, you're going to faint. There's a stream up ahead. Even if you don't like it, please endure it. Floan stared at him, then finally answered softly, okay. Before long, they arrived at the stream. The moment she stepped into the water, more than half of the oppressive heat in her body vanished. Enoch turned around. I'll stand guard. Come out when you've cooled down enough. Oh, and if you need anything, his words stopped abruptly, because the girl had just happened to lift her long hair. Sunlight danced across the elegant line of her back, as if she were coated in a fine layer of golden light, dazzling enough that he couldn't look away. The girl noticed nothing. She turned back and looked at him in confusion. What are you saying? Enoch's face instantly turned bright red, and even his words became halting. In nothing. If you need anything, just tell me. The girl answered casually. The soft sound of dripping water rose and fell by his ears. Enoch felt as if his heart were about to leap from his chest. Every muscle in his body tightened as he kept warning himself, get a grip, Enoch. What exactly are you thinking about a young lady for? Just then, his sleeve was lightly tugged. The girl's somewhat hesitant voice came from behind him. I can't reach my back with my hands. Could you help me undo the clasp? The man jolted. What did you say? Floan forced herself to stay calm. Could you help me unfasten it here? She really had no choice. Her arms were too short to reach the clasp, and this was the only set of clothes she had. She couldn't exactly go back wearing wet clothes. Enoch covered his face and felt like he was going mad. His gaze dropped involuntarily. The skin that had just gleamed in the sunlight now filled his vision all at once. Floan gripped her hair, looking even more nervous than he did. After a long while, a hand finally reached toward her. He was clearly not used to doing anything like this. His fingertips were clumsy, his movements painfully slow. Margaret, he suddenly said, after we leave this island, what do you want to do most? The girl thought about it. First, I want to take a hot bath with soap. And after that, I want to eat a huge, proper meal. He remembered the last proper meal he had at the Floan estate. It had been nothing short of heavenly. He had never tasted it himself, of course, but Margaret's memories had long since become one with his own. But no matter how delicious the food in this world was, no matter how many priceless jewels and ornaments one could wear, he still missed the place where he had been born, even if he had only been an orphan there. Even if it was a place where no one would welcome him back. What about you, Enoch? What do you want to do after we leave here? That. He paused and did not continue. Floan pouted and waved her fist. What is that supposed to mean? I answered honestly, and you're brushing me off? Her flailing arm was suddenly caught. Enoch bent down close to her. But Margaret, if I really said it, you'd probably feel troubled. The girl whipped around. Troubled? What does that mean? Before she could finish, he lightly poked her back. The buttons have been undone for quite a while, but you didn't seem to notice. Floan's face flushed scarlet in an instant. She spun around and glared at him. Then you should have told me sooner. The man only raised both hands with an innocent look, apologizing again and again. What a smooth talker. The girl ran toward the western side in big strides, her whole face red as if it had been boiled. Seriously, absolutely do not turn around. Floan lay back in the water. After her entire body relaxed completely, she planned to continue exploring the island with Enoch. But the dress she had left on the shore had vanished without a trace. Lowering her voice, she called to the man, standing not far away. Enoch, where did you put my clothes? The man tapped his fingers lightly. I don't understand. Why are you asking me where the dress you took off yourself is gone? No. Floan's voice carried a trace of panic. My clothes seem to be gone. Only then did the man realize something was wrong. He had just started to turn around when the girl's urgent scream stopped him cold. Floan hurriedly sank halfway back into the water. I didn't hear anyone approaching at all. Could there be other people on this island? Enoch picked up the weapon at his feet. I'll check the area. Wait here. With that, he headed into the depths of the forest. Floan stayed where she was, wondering what on earth was going on. Meanwhile, following the traces on the ground, Enoch quickly caught up to the sneaking figure. In the blink of an eye, he pinned the person hard to the ground. There really are a lot of familiar faces on this island. Don't you think, Sir Diego? The man pinned to the ground looked mortified. Who could have imagined that the person who stole Floan's dress would be the captain of the Imperial Guard of the Langrid Empire? According to Diego, he had suddenly lost consciousness during a training exercise, and when he woke up, he was already here. I have two companions with me. Your Highness knows them as well. Prince Astel and Bishop Rujev. They're here, just like I am. Enoch's expression darkened. At first he had thought it was the work of Crown Prince Rodvin's faction. But now it seemed there were not only people from Langrid here, but even people from Hestia, just who had laid out this entire game from the shadows. Then he cast a sharp look at Diego. Among your companions, is there someone who needs women's clothing? Diego immediately explained. The situation was urgent. One of my companions needed clothing like that. But that gown doesn't look like something Prince Astel or Bishop Rujiv could wear. Are you suspecting me? A powerful killing intent burst from Enoch. The tip of his weapon was once again aimed at Diego. Answer my question. Diego panicked at once. Your Highness, I am a knight of the Langrid Empire, not your enemy. Then why didn't you remember that when you stole my companion's clothes? Diego could no longer conceal it. Gritting his teeth, he confessed, among my companions is Saint Joanna Lucy. Joanna Lucy was a saintess blessed with innate divine power, one who appeared only once every 100 years in the Empire. Instead of clearing things up, the truth only became more confusing. A thread of anger rose in Enoch's chest. Even clergy had not escaped this disaster. As expected, gods did not exist. But what mattered now was this. He demanded, that woman has no clothes of her own? This gown is my companion's only set of clothing. If you still had to steal even that, then the proper explanation would be that the saintess is currently naked. It seemed he guessed right. Hand the clothes over. Now, Diego did not dare resist any longer. He hurriedly took out the clothes and respectfully handed them to Enoch. After taking them, Enoch coldly instructed him, we meet here once every 10 days. If you move somewhere far away, tell me in advance. And do not let your companions know. Seeing Enoch turn to leave, Diego grew anxious. Won't you come with me, your highness? Enoch stopped and looked back at him, his gaze icy enough to cut flesh. I believe I said that you only need answer my questions. Diego immediately lowered himself again. Understood. And if you find a way off this island, contact me. Do not appear in my companion's line of sight. If you get in my way, I won't spare you. Floan sat on a rock at the water's edge, wearing only a thin slip. With a cold wind blew, she sneezed twice in a row, just as she was wondering where Enoch had gone. The man finally returned, bringing her clothes back with him. The girl got up excitedly, but the moment she stood steady, a violent wave of dizziness crashed over her. She fell straight back into the icy stream. When she woke again, she had already returned to the cave. A voice came from above. You're awake. Only then did she realize that her head was resting on Enoch's lap. What happened? Enoch's voice held a trace of fatigue. I'm sorry. You suddenly developed a fever. It seemed like you caught a chill. I wanted to give you some medicine, but I didn't know which one to choose. Floan followed his gaze. Medicines from the first aid kit were scattered all over the floor. With a self-mocking smile, Enoch said, in my entire life, I have never felt as powerless as I do now. But that isn't your fault. Floan tried to comfort him, but then suddenly remembered something, right? Where did you find my clothes? Enoch hesitated. I ran into Sir Diego. Floan's heart clenched. Diego? That Imperial Guard captain, famous in the Empire for integrity and knightly honor, had stolen the clothes of a woman while she was bathing? Had his knightly honor been eaten by dogs? Enoch suddenly leaned forward and gave her a solemn bow. He was originally one of my men. So for the discourtesy shown by the knight, I should apologize on his behalf. No. Why are you apologizing? Because you were afraid of him. Diego is straightforward by nature and strongly dislikes the way you used to flatter and chase after others. Every time he saw you, his attitude was especially sharp. So I concealed the fact that the owner of the clothes was you. If you think you must receive his apology in person, then I can bring him here. A strange feeling rose in Floan's chest. They had agreed not to burden each other. So what exactly was all this he was doing now? Forget it. I'll get my revenge myself later. At that, a smile appeared on Enoch's face. He reached out and gently rested his hand atop Floan's head. A low, hearty laugh rumbled in his chest. I knew it. Floan instantly bristled. What was he laughing at? Did he think she was a dog or something? But Enoch's touch did not make her feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, it gradually settled her heart. Was it because no one had ever treated her like this when she had been Li Jinju? So this was what it felt like to have someone pat your head. Wait, was there no one else besides Sir Diego? Enoch's gaze drifted away. I don't know. Floan could not understand why he was acting like that. If we want to escape this island, wouldn't it be better to act together? You have a point. But their situation is much the same as ours. They don't know anything either. Still, we've agreed to meet once every 10 days and exchange information. You don't need to worry. Floan accepted that explanation for the time being. But then she suddenly remembered what had happened before she fainted. She had been wearing only a slip. Thinking of it, she immediately looked at Enoch. He stiffened in shock and tried awkwardly to hide his embarrassment. "I changed your clothes, but I really did try my best to keep my eyes shut and not look at you." Floan's voice came quietly. "So you did look after all." Enoch fell silent. A rush of heat shot straight to Floan's head. If she viewed this from Margaret's perspective, how was she supposed to get married in the future? "You're worried about that? Then doesn't that solve the marriage issue? I can marry you." The girl exploded at once. "Are you serious? Back when I said I wanted to marry you, you rejected me because you disliked me. But the circumstances then were different from who you are now." Floan's heart trembled. He said she was different, but the Margaret of now was her. She was Margaret, so what was the point of saying such things? She did not dare respond and hurriedly changed the subject. "Caden?" Enoch pointed to the white-haired man sleeping soundly on the ground. "That guy had a fever last night too, but he seems fine now." Floan let out a breath of relief. She quickly stood up and fled. "You worked hard. My fever seems to have gone down too. You should get some rest. I'll sleep over there." Though he knew she was avoiding him, Enoch could only sigh helplessly. "Good night." But the girl never imagined that in the middle of the night, Caden would attack her. The man she had personally saved pinned her firmly to the ground. The Mad Master of the Magic Tower, the one who had killed Floan in the original story, Caden had finally seen through her identity. "Don't scream. You'll wake that man." A platinum-haired woman staying with Crown Prince Enoch. "Why did you lie?" "Margaret." His voice carried amusement. "Because I said I didn't like Miss Floan, right? But lying is still wrong. You're much smarter than I imagined. If you'd openly admitted then that you were Margaret, I really don't know what I would have done." He spoke sincerely. "On this deserted island, the first person I happened to run into was you, Margaret. Isn't that rather interesting? But how strange. It's clearly the exact same face as before, yet it feels completely different." Caden suddenly bent down close, studying her face in detail. "Why does it feel so different? The you right now is a little more to my taste." Right then, Caden was violently knocked away by a force. "Long time no see, Rod." At some point, Enoch had stepped in front of Floan. He stared coldly at Caden. "You regain consciousness only to threaten your savior? What country's manners are those?" Caden's tone was full of disbelief. "My savior? You mean Margaret healed my wounds?" Enoch did not answer. He merely tilted his head slightly toward the girl behind him. "Margaret, have you permitted Rod to call your name directly?" The girl frantically shook her head. He turned back and rebuked Caden. "How rude." Caden, however, only smiled carelessly. "When we don't even know whether we'll survive, what meaning is there in such empty formalities? For now, perhaps none." Enoch suddenly reached out and pulled Floan to his side, taking on the unmistakable posture of a protector. "But if we leave this island alive, that will be another matter." Caden's gaze was thick with mockery. "Well, this is new." Crown Prince Enoch defending Miss Floan. Then Floan suddenly spoke up. "Enoch, wait." She stepped forward 2 paces, her eyes falling on Caden's wounds. "How'd you get hurt like this?" "How else?" "This island is crawling with monsters. I was attacked by one, but it's a relief that you're all right." Caden's answer was no different from confirming her suspicion. So the loud noise that day had been caused by him. This man was supposed to hate her, and yet, after learning she was in danger, he had chosen to sacrifice himself to lure the monsters away. Floan could not understand it. Why had he done that? "This is yours, isn't it?" She took out the pendant she had picked up earlier and held it out to Caden. But the man showed an expression of deep disgust. "It's certainly important, but I don't exactly like it. This is the manna vessel of the successive lords of the Magic Tower. If I had to compare it to something, it's basically an urn." Floan got goosebumps. Nina really had brought back something extraordinary. You could call it one of the symbols of the Magic Tower. After each lord dies, their magic is sealed inside this pendant. It is said that even the power of the Lord of the Magic Tower from the Ingram dynasty, before the founding of the Langrid Empire, is stored in here. So there is a rumor that this pendant possesses enough destructive power to wipe out a nation. But only the mage who personally made the pendant can undo the seal. Unfortunately, that person died 1,000 years ago, so it's useless now. "I see." But Floan only grew more puzzled. Why was Caden telling them all this? He spoke again. "Then how did the 2 of you come to this island?" Enoch countered, "What about you, Rod?" "Me? I remember I was just about to charge into the temple." The 2 exchanged a look, silently understanding his hatred of the temple. "So you don't want to say?" Caden did not press the matter. "Whatever. Once I recover, I'll leave this place anyway. In any case, thank you for treating my wounds, Margaret." The light, flirtatious look Caden gave her made both Enoch and Floan uncomfortable. "You said you'll leave. Where will you go?" Floan's heart stirred. Did he know something about the cabin or the bunker? But to her surprise, Caden had no plan at all. Somewhere, I guess. I plan to search the island first. Waking up in a place like this out of nowhere is suspicious in itself. Since I have no memory of being moved, I was probably teleported here. If that's the case, there ought to be a portal somewhere that can take us out. Enoch nodded at his words. I hadn't considered the possibility of a portal. Well, I'm especially good in that area. The girl was a little surprised. Was it because he was a mage? He had so quickly identified the key to escaping the island. Caden's gaze fell back on her, just as Floan felt a flicker of wariness rise inside her. He held out his hand with a smile tinged with seductive mischief. Margaret, do you want to come with me? Enoch's face instantly darkened like the bottom of a pot. Floan looked utterly bewildered. Wait, was this man actually insane? He was the detested villain of the novel. Yet at this moment, he had become the object of the male lead's rivalry. Right in front of the crown prince, Caden was openly trying to lure her away. Margaret, will you come with me? Enoch's expression turned black at once. Floan was still completely at a loss. Before she could even answer, Enoch stepped in front of her. Stop talking nonsense. What are you trying to do to Margaret now? As soon as he finished speaking, he took the girl's hand. Go back and rest first. Floan looked back at Caden. Honestly, she was still wondering how she ought to refuse him. Fortunately, Enoch had stepped in to resolve it in time. This guy had stuck to her like glue. I heard you're planning to stay here. Why? This place is inconvenient, and the environment isn't exactly comfortable either. He had clearly said he would leave once his wounds healed, but now he was shamelessly refusing to move out. A few days earlier, when Caden's wounds had just begun to improve, Enoch had thrown him outside, but Caden had stubbornly guarded the cave entrance for 2 whole nights. At night, the scent of humans easily attracted monsters, so Floan had no choice but to let him back in. He truly was no ordinary lunatic. Caden blinked, then asked again, where are you going? To scout the area. More precisely, she was going mountain climbing. The man suddenly stood up. Wait, but he froze halfway. A sharp pain in his abdomen made him collapse back down. The girl waved her hand dashingly. Patients should rest quietly. Not until the setting sun stained the sky red did Floan stop in defeat. Another day with nothing to show for it. In a place this vast, how was she supposed to find the cabin and bunker? Exhausted, she sank onto the ground. She gulped down water, and only after her parched throat was soothed did she recover some strength. She had already been on this island for 3 weeks. During that time, they had found no way to call for help, nor any path off the island. Even Diego, who was supposed to exchange information with Enoch regularly, had not sent any word at all, perhaps because Enoch had gradually adapted to life on the island. The man who had once been overly protective of her now allowed her to move freely before sunset. Once she had rested enough, she got up to head back down the mountain, but her foot suddenly hit something hard. It was a pistol engraved with the name Elia. Beside it was a bag of ammunition. But no matter how she pulled the trigger, the pistol did nothing. Was it broken? Unwilling to give up, she pressed at it several more times at random. At that instant, the supposedly useless chamber suddenly burst with fire, accompanied by a deafening bang. The bullet exploded high in the air into a brilliant firework. She was doomed. As the sun set, monsters would begin to move. It went without saying what that sound would bring. She turned and ran wildly down the mountain. The footsteps behind her grew closer and closer. As she ran, she kicked over fallen trunks in the path. The trick bought her a little time, slowing the monsters briefly. But then, a figure suddenly appeared ahead. Floan steeled herself and shouted at the top of her lungs, "Get out of the way!" The man had barely turned around before the sight behind her scared him out of his wits. A horde of monsters were charging straight toward them with claws bared and fangs exposed. "What are you standing there for? Run!" Seeing him rooted to the spot, Floan grabbed his wrist. The monster's howls came closer and closer. The man demanded in terror, "Why are the monsters gathered together like this? Could it be because of that strange magic that exploded in the sky just now?" First of all, magic doesn't work on this island, so what you saw wasn't magic. Seeing the monsters about to catch up, Floan spotted a huge boulder ahead. An idea flashed through her mind. "I've got one. When I give the signal, drop flat immediately." Before the man could react, Floan suddenly raised the gun and aimed it at him. "Get down!" Fortunately, he reacted fast. She pulled the trigger at the swarm of monsters rushing in behind him. A blaze erupted into the sky. The two of them crouched behind the rock, waiting for the flames to die down. The pack of monsters had been wiped out in a single strike. Saved. Flown collapsed weakly to the ground, all the strength draining from her body. But the man behind her suddenly stepped closer, his voice full of anger. Who exactly are you? His pale blue hair, clear as water, fluttered in the wind. Flown recognized him instantly. One of the 12 saints of the Holy Kingdom of Hestia, the Archbishop Rujiv. Are you a witch? Flown frowned. How could I be? I kindly saved you, and this is how you treat your savior? The man's expression did not change, though he barely restrained his anger. You have my thanks for saving me, for now. What do you mean, for now? But in the very next second, Rujiv suddenly grabbed her. Wait, are you Miss Flown? You followed me all the way to a place like this? Was it all to force me to make you a love potion? Flown slapped his hand away. What love potion? The moment the words left her mouth, fragments of Margaret's memories flashed through her mind. So Margaret had once doggedly pursued Rujiv to obtain a love potion, and had even used other clergy's support to push the experiment forward. No wonder he hated Margaret so much. Putting on a shamelessly blank act, the girl began to play dumb. I'm not some Miss Flown. Stop trying to deny it. Bringing me to this island was also your doing, wasn't it? Seriously? He was trying to pin that blame on her too? If she let him steer the story like this, then the next time she met anyone else, wouldn't she be saddled with the same accusation? She abruptly stood. After taking a deep breath, she launched her counterattack. How can you be so rude? I told you I'm not her. And I nearly got torn to pieces myself, okay? Rujiv was taken aback. Mississippi, why are you suddenly shouting? Who's your miss? I told you you've got the wrong person, and I saved your life. At a time like this, even kneeling and thanking me wouldn't be too much. The least you can do is say thank you. Rujiv was completely thrown off by her barrage. Well, I suppose that's true. Then bow and thank me. The man obediently lowered his head. Flown raised her voice with a fierce expression. Say thank you, and don't lift your head until I say so. While the man was still dazed, Flown quietly backed away a few steps, turned, and bolted. In her heart, she kept repeating, it's fine. It's not like I'll ever see that guy again anyway. She could not remember how many times Enoch had pulled her into his arms. But only this time, having just crawled back from the edge of death, Flown finally burst into uncontrollable tears. Perhaps his embrace was too warm, or perhaps the urgency and anxiety surging from him were too real. At last, all the grievance and fear she had suppressed for so long found an opening and poured out. There was so much she wanted to tell Enoch. That strange fireworks formation in the sky had only been a flare she happened to find. She had nearly been devoured by monsters again, and had run into someone she did not want to see. Because survival had been such a pressing issue, she had deliberately ignored one truth this whole time. She was terrified too. Back in the cave, the inside was already a mess. The fish spears they had worked so hard to make, and the polished coconut bowls had all been smashed to pieces. Enoch was carefully applying medicine to her feet. The soles were covered in blisters, with several places rubbed raw. It hurt so much she kept sucking in cold breaths. Ow, that hurts. Bear with it. Enoch's tone was stiff, with not the slightest intention of comforting her. He was definitely still angry. But after looking around the cave, she asked, how did it get like this in just 4 weeks? Enoch looked away. Rather than brushing you off, I'll just say it turned out like this. And Caden, you want to look for you. Flown was surprised. Even Caden had gone out into danger to search for her. Still, why was this man so angry? She could guess. If he had not been worried about her, Enoch would not be like this. Guilt welled up inside her. She hurriedly explained, I just went climbing. I thought I'd be back quickly. Maybe because I haven't exercised in so long, I lost all sense of time. I ran all the way down the mountain, and I even took care of the monsters chasing me. Her voice grew smaller and smaller, because Enoch's face was sinking darker by the moment. In the end, she could only laugh awkwardly twice. This was unbearable. She would rather Enoch yell at her fiercely than endure the pressure of this silence. After a long while, Enoch lowered his head and let out a heavy sigh. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself. How could I possibly have feelings for you? Caden's body jolted violently, as if he had suddenly realized something. He opened his mouth to explain, but swallowed the words before they came out. After a long silence, he finally spoke in a hoarse voice. I am sorry. At first, I was afraid you would deceive me, but you're not like the Margaret I knew before. You're completely different from the way the rumors described you too. So I started paying attention to everything you did. I never expected to grow more and more curious about you, and in the end, to fall for you. A trace of grievance appeared in his beautiful eyes and brows. I can't control these feelings either. Floan only looked at him coldly, whether it was because of her terrible first impression of him, or because she already knew what kind of man he was. No matter what Caden said, she couldn't feel a shred of sincerity from him. But she had no intention of offending him. Fine, since you don't like me anyway, don't do this kind of weird thing again. Caden's lips twitched. I don't know what you're talking about. But the girl's next sentence tore right through his disguise. Your earring is broken, isn't it? I know it helps regulate your emotions, right? This was the first time Caden had truly lost his composure in front of her. He still forced a smile at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were full of shock. How do you know that? Because I know the person who made that earring. Floan's tone was calm. Anyway, you need to learn how to regulate your emotions properly without relying on the earring. I think I understand now why you said all those strange things to me. It was probably because of the earring. She wasn't particularly close with Caden, but at this point, even she could figure it out, especially with Enoch as well. In the end, they were the male leads of the novel. Once they met the heroine in the future, their feelings would eventually change. She could borrow their strength from time to time, but she absolutely could not trust them. Thinking this, she stood up and prepared to return to the cave to continue training. But Caden grabbed her wrist again. His voice carried a trace of stubbornness. Yeah, even you think it's absurd, don't you? But Margaret, I become interested in you. No matter what the reason was at first, my feelings now are real. So I should be the one to decide what to do with these feelings. Before he could finish, he lowered his head and pressed a long kiss to the back of her hand. And that lecture, just now, was a bit too arrogant too. The soft touch landed without warning. Floan bristled instantly. She yanked her hand back and snapped in anger. You're plenty arrogant yourself. You always do whatever you want. Caden spread his hands, an uninhibited smile blooming across his handsome face. Of course I know that. Floan turned angrily and walked toward the cave. But after only a few steps, she stopped in place. Enoch was standing not far away. There was worry in his eyes, and a trace of complicated emotion she couldn't understand. Caden's words still seemed to echo in her ears. Her heart sank. Had Enoch heard everything just now? But tonight, she was truly too tired. Floan said nothing and simply walked past him in silence. She believed she had already given them the most appropriate response. Hopefully, when they met the heroine in the future, they wouldn't regret the words they had said to her today. She was clearly struggling to survive on a deserted island. Yet she had received confessions from the male leads all at once. But this ambiguous atmosphere didn't last. A day later, Floan fell sick. It wasn't until the fourth day, when she had just walked out of the cave, that she saw the two men sitting around the campfire. Caden was twisting strips of bark into something like rope. She recalled the novel mentioning that although he was a mage, Caden was good at making all kinds of strange tools. Enoch spoke first. Are you feeling better? Floan let out a heavy sigh. I rushed down the mountain that day, and the next day, all my muscles were terribly sore. She was already thinking that once she recovered a little more, she needed to start physical training immediately. But then a pair of warm hands suddenly covered her own. Good thing your fever's gone down. Enoch's voice was close by her ear. The sudden touch made Floan panic. Didn't I say I'm fine now? Seeing her reaction, Enoch seemed infected by it as well, and a subtle intimacy quietly spread between them. Aren't you going to rest a little longer? Caden's voice suddenly cut in, breaking the atmosphere. Floan hurriedly shook her head. I've rested enough already. I can't just lie around doing nothing forever. A trace of regret flashed across Caden's face as he quietly moved back to the other side. Leaning closer to Enoch, he asked in a lowered voice, Has there been any news from Sir Diego's side lately? Enoch answered regretfully, No. It seems that gentleman has no clue how to leave this island either. Floan turned back and casually probed Caden. While wandering around the island alone, have you seen anyone else? Caden shrugged. Haven't seen anyone. I was only roaming around to hunt monsters in the first place. Floan looked puzzled. Wouldn't it be enough just to avoid them? Why go out of your way to hunt them? That's dangerous. Caden lifted his eyes slightly. His gaze swept thoughtfully between her and Enoch before he slowly spoke. Because there are things I want to figure out. Figure out what? For example, magic clearly can't be used on this island. And yet monsters that depend on magic to exist are everywhere. And that's far from the only strange thing. The silent Enoch suddenly spoke up. While scouting today, near the cliff, I saw some carvings I couldn't make sense of. As he spoke, he lifted a branch and drew on the ground. Floan's eyes widened instantly. There on the ground was the English word Lia. I saw that too, Caden immediately added. The same letters were carved onto the monsters as well. Floan's heart gave a violent jolt. She suddenly remembered something and hurriedly searched through the pocket of her dress. Seeing this, Caden immediately leaned over curiously. What's that? I picked it up on the mountain a few days ago. The explosion in the sky that day was caused by this. Caden's eyes lit up at once. What? You caused that explosion? How did you do it? Enoch also looked over with clear curiosity. Floan quickly explained, it's not that I meant to keep it secret. There was just too much going on these past few days, and I forgot. Caden took the flare gun from her. He lowered his head and began examining it carefully. Only then did Enoch say, is this a magical tool? Floan had wanted to say directly that it was used to send a distress signal, but it seemed to have been modified by someone. But after a second thought, no one here knew what it was for. If she explained it too clearly, it would seem far too strange. So she simply answered, I'm not sure. Caden quickly disassembled the gun. This really does look like a magical device. I can sense a faint fluctuation of magic from it. Floan briefly explained how she had activated it. Then she changed the subject. But that's not important. What matters is this. I told you before, I studied the language of the Eastern continent, right? The letters carved here, Lia, should be a person's name. Perhaps this is the name of the person who made this tool. Other than us, someone else has definitely been on this island. Caden's expression turned serious. We can't rule that out. They may even still be here now. If what Margaret says is true, and the owner of this magical tool is still alive, then the one who kidnapped us here is probably that person. In order to suppress the surging magic inside Caden and to steer this mature novel back toward a more innocent route, Floan made up her mind to be a capitalist and work that legendary master of the magic tower like a beast of burden. The name engraved on the flare gun became their first clue on the island. When Caden suggested that the person who had kidnapped them might be the one who made this magical tool, Floan's heart sank. If this person named Lia really was the culprit, then where exactly was this island? In her own country, or somewhere completely unknown? Would they end up like victims in a movie, reduced to test subjects for someone else's experiments? And if that assumption were true, then why had things that didn't belong to this world appeared here? And why had she, of all people, transmigrated into Margaret's body? Looks like I need to gather more information. It's too hard to make an accurate judgment based on this alone. As Enoch said this, he handed the flare gun back to her. Seeing that the sun was about to set, they put out the campfire. From that night on, Enoch's hostility toward Caden seemed to ease somewhat. But whenever Caden tried to get close to her, Enoch would immediately become guarded again. At dawn, when Floan woke up, she found the cave empty. Just as she sat up, Caden walked in with a smile and greeted her. Floan looked up. Caden's mage robe was splattered with glaring bloodstains. She frowned instantly, but before she could ask anything, Caden sat down beside her and started tidying himself up as if nothing had happened. Where did you go? Floan asked first. Hunting. Those wolf cubs were making a racket all night, so I took care of all the ones nearby. It finally feels refreshing now. Floan knew that Caden had the kind of constitution where magic overflowed and built up inside his body, requiring regular release. But the earring responsible for regulating it was already broken. At the moment, he was probably relieving the pressure by killing monsters. But this couldn't go on forever. What if one day he suddenly went mad? The original work was, after all, a mature romance novel. In the book, Caden's magic problem had been resolved by intimate means. But there was no way she could do something like that. If a person could artificially open the channels through which magic flowed, then there had to be other workable methods too. At that moment, she suddenly remembered Margaret's past. In magic class, a teacher had once told her this. Using magic is like breathing. It depends on consistent training. Miss, you possess an immense amount of magic. As long as you improve your physical strength, you'll be able to control that power well. Maybe this method would work on Caden too. Besides, after just hunting monsters, he had described himself as feeling refreshed. So hunting clearly could ease his discomfort. Noticing Floan's gaze lingering on him, Caden curved his brows and smiled. Why do you keep staring at me? Have I mesmerized you? Floan slapped away the signal he was trying to send, as if Then she stood up and looked at him again. I need to ask you a favor. Enoch probably want to look for food. Before he gets back, can you light the fire? That's not a problem, right? As she spoke, she tossed the firewood she had just picked up straight to him. Caden caught it blankly. His expression clearly said he had no clue how to live like this. Even so, Floan had no intention of letting him off. The girl wore a bright smile, but in her heart, she was calculating how best to make use of this man. After all, in her book, people who didn't work had no right to eat. He was the strongest mage in the world. Yet for the girl he had once utterly despised, he had developed feelings so strange that even he found them unsettling. When the girl smiled and told him to start the fire, Caden stared for a moment, dazed. He didn't respond for a long while. Floan thought he couldn't do it, so she reached out and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, then we'll wait for Enoch to come back and do it. But the moment she finished speaking, Caden suddenly looked as if he had been injected with energy and blurted out, I'm amazing at this kind of thing. Floan froze. Then she burst out laughing. Margaret, you're too naive. It's true most mages are eccentrics. But as the Lord of the Magic Tower, how could I possibly not know such basic things? Only then did she suddenly remember that in the original work, Caden had always been a genius with broad knowledge in nearly every field. Someone like that obviously wouldn't fail at basic survival skills. It's just that living is such a hassle. I'd rather go gather firewood. Floan was so annoyed her temples throbbed, but she said nothing more. She simply turned around, picked up the spear, and said, fine. Then I'm leaving it to you. I'll go get some game. Caden's eyes widened in disbelief. Game? You mean fish? Aren't those the things you've been eating these days? Wait, did I hear that right? Margaret Floan is going fishing? This is insane. Are you really a noble lady? The girl pouted slightly. What kind of nonsense is that? Noble ladies can't fish? Even noble sons wouldn't go fishing, let alone with that fish spear. To be honest, even without him saying it, she herself knew how absurd it sounded. What noble would personally go catch fish? But right now, this was about survival. Who had time to care about that? Besides, she was sick of eating only fish and coconuts every day. There weren't any wild beasts nearby to hunt either. It was time to move and find a place with more food. As she was thinking this, Enoch happened to return. The moment he saw Caden, his expression darkened instantly. I tied him up properly, hearing Enoch mutter under his breath. Floan finally noticed the strip of cloth hanging loosely from Caden's right wrist. Apparently, Enoch had tied Caden up before leaving the cave earlier. Don't go near Margaret. Enoch stepped in front of her again. Caden snorted with a laugh. So now I'm some kind of dangerous beast? They had been chatting just fine by the campfire last night. He thought the two of them had gotten closer, but apparently it was still like this. Floan could only step forward to mediate. Enoch, stop tying him up. I still need him to do something. But Caden suddenly shot back from the side. What if I don't do it? Then you don't eat. Caden immediately asked in an elegant, ingratiating tone, how much firewood do you want me to gather? Enough for tonight and tomorrow. Having received his instructions, Caden rushed out of the cave at once. These two really were something else, but she had to endure it. First things first, she had to stop them from fighting. Unexpectedly, when Caden came back after gathering firewood, he looked refreshed. I feel like my mind is totally clear now. I'm in great shape. Floan thought to herself that physical labor seemed pretty effective at smoothing out his magic flow too. It was certainly better than letting him risk himself hunting monsters. Now, it was her turn. Caden leaned closer curiously. You know how to do this too? Floan was preparing to handle the rabbit Enoch had caught. She glanced at Caden and kept working. He moved closer and closer. Want me to help? No, go help Enoch. Not only did Caden stay where he was, he lowered his voice instead. I've wanted to ask for a while now. Margaret, you're really different from the young lady I knew. That's because you never really understood her. Enoch suddenly spoke up with a hint of pride in his voice. Haven't you realized that after traveling together these past days, she's not some ordinary noble lady? Floan silently complained in her heart. You say that like you know who I really am. Caden was strange enough already. How had even Enoch started acting like this? But as soon as Enoch said it, Caden's interest was instantly piqued. Margaret, what do you really like? He looked at her expectantly. Floan froze for a moment, then casually blurted out, probably someone like Bear Grylls. Caden looked blank. Who's Bear? Just someone like that. Anyway, you're my way. Go help Enoch. Fortunately, Caden didn't keep asking. He obediently went over to Enoch. Compared to the original novel, the current Caden was already being quite cooperative. In the novel, even with the heroine around, he never participated in group life and always acted alone. But now he refused to leave. What's more, aside from Enoch, Kaden had once been the one who looked down on her the most in the original story. Yet now both of them were especially kind to her. Looking at the two of them bickering in front of her, while still obediently helping with the work, Floan's heart softened slightly. This doesn't seem so bad after all. I really hope this rare kindness can last. Stranded on a deserted island, and everyone around her was useless. The two great male leads from the original story could only play the role of incompetent husbands, while she alone, the transmigrated cannon fodder, had to carry the whole team. The next day, they finally decided to move. While out, Kaden had discovered a river. Compared to the seashore, not only would wild animals come there to drink, they could also find a greater variety of wild fruit. Delighted, he proposed moving there immediately. But then she suddenly remembered that the reason Enoch had been unwilling to leave the shore was because he feared missing the chance to call for help if a ship passed by. But it had already been a month since they first woke up here. Compared with rescue that might never come, survival should take priority right now. Floan tried to persuade Enoch and suggested building a shelter near the river. Besides, we also need to look for information related to Leah. Maybe we'll find a clue about how to leave this island. Enoch fell silent for a moment. Then he softly agreed. All right, we'll do that. Once we've eaten, we'll pack up and move. Seeing that she had finally persuaded Enoch, a genuine smile appeared on Floan's face. She suddenly looked toward Kaden. Kaden, are you coming with us too? At that question, Kaden immediately put on a slightly aggrieved expression. Wait, why are you only asking me? Crown Prince Enoch is going, so wouldn't I go too? Enoch, standing nearby, suddenly let out a faint laugh. What kind of question is that? Between Margaret and me, there was never any room for you to interfere in the first place. Kaden instantly flared up in response. No room? Then I'll make some, as long as Margaret is willing to give me a chance. Seeing the two of them about to clash again, Floan almost wanted to throw them aside and leave by herself. Not long after, they packed up their things and set off. Finally, before sunset, they arrived at the large river Kaden had found. The gently flowing water was perfect for fish to live in, and once boiled, it would be more than suitable for both drinking and washing. Floan took a liking to an open patch of land. It should be nice to build a small hut here with branches. The two men spoke at the same time. A hut? She nodded. That's right. I already looked around on the way here. There aren't any caves nearby to hide in, and there's nowhere else to take shelter. So we have to build a place to stay before nightfall. As she spoke, she began assigning tasks. Then let's get moving. It might flood when it rains, so the hut should be built on slightly higher ground. That'll also help us avoid ants and scorpions. Wait, Margaret, how exactly do you make the kind of hut you're talking about? Floan paused slightly. She had almost forgotten that the two men in front of her were the Imperial Crown Prince and a Magic Tower Lord from noble birth. How could they possibly have ever seen such a thing? She picked up a branch and drew on the ground, patiently explaining to them how to build a temporary hut, what kind of wood they would need, and what details to pay attention to. That should do it. Enoch rubbed his chin slightly. It's not too different from the temporary shelter we built by the shore before. Exactly. Kaden raised another question. But if we need to cut trees, we'll need sharper tools. Tools? Floan paused. Then she immediately turned and walked toward the riverbank. Looking up, a confident smile appeared on her face. If we need tools, we could just make them now. Kaden's clinginess far exceeded Floan's expectations. It had even reached a frightening level. The girl had finally had enough of the endless arguing between the two men and decided she would leave on her own. Not long ago, Kaden had casually mentioned that they needed weapons, and Floan had turned and walked toward a rocky cliffside. She tied her long hair high up and selected suitable stones. Seeing that she was actually about to carry stones herself, Kaden immediately cried out, "Hey, whatever you want to do, just tell me. I'll do it." But she acted as if she hadn't heard. She directly lifted a stone and smashed it hard against the ground. After striking it 3 or 4 times, the stone split apart. From the fragments, she picked out several thin, sharp flakes and held them out to the two men. If we make a few more and polish them with stone, they should work as axes. Kaden stared at her strangely and finally couldn't hold back. Honestly, you're not Margaret, are you? Floan replied flatly, "You're noisy. Hurry up and get to work. We have to finish the hut before sunset." Enoch was in charge of making tools, while Kaden stayed glued to her side. "You can tell me the truth now. How would a duke's daughter know all this? What exactly is there that you can't do? His eyes were full of curiosity. They say mages are obsessed with exploring the unknown. Apparently, that saying is absolutely true. At that moment, she suddenly noticed a log ahead of them with just the right thickness. It would work perfectly as a support. She said to Caden, "Give me a hand." The moment she spoke, Caden had already hoisted the log up as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What do you mean, give you a hand? This kind of thing should have been my job in the first place." He lifted the log easily. Floan had originally assumed that mages were all physically weak, but unexpectedly, he was very strong. With the three of them working together, progress was much faster than expected. Of course, that was also because they were only building a simple temporary shelter. The wooden shed was much larger than the one they had first built on the beach, enough to hold 4 adults. But just imagining having to squeeze in there overnight with those two made her unable to feel happy about it all. Still, she was too exhausted to care. Floan relaxed and lay down on the bedding they had spread out. Silently, she thought that she had to find a shelter described in the novel as soon as possible. There was no place safer or more comfortable than that. She didn't notice that Caden, who had lain down with her, had once again let his gaze drift quietly toward her. A soft sensation suddenly pressed against her shoulder. Floan's whole body instantly stiffened. She turned sharply and saw Caden give a light laugh. "There's not enough room, so let's just sleep like this." As he spoke, he even squeezed closer to her, clearly intending to use her as a body pillow. "Are you insane?" Floan pressed a hand against his face to stop him from getting any closer. A ticklish sensation suddenly brushed across her palm, making her explode. But Enoch was even faster than she was. He seemed to descend from the heavens and kicked Caden over in one blow. Caden clutched the chin that had been kicked, glaring furiously at him. Enoch's expression didn't change. He calmly squeezed himself down between the two of them and lay there. Caden bristled. "What are you doing?" Enoch's gaze turned icy. "Roade, what exactly are you doing?" "I was just preparing to sleep, and your highness kicks people with his feet? What country's etiquette is that? If you care so much about etiquette, then you shouldn't be putting your hands all over a woman." The two of them started arguing endlessly again. Then they turned to ask the girl to judge. "Margaret, what do you think?" Only to discover that she was carrying her bedding and preparing to leave. Both men froze on the spot. "Where are you going?" Floan gave them a smile, so chilling it sent cold all through their bodies. "Since the two of you never seem to stop arguing when I'm here, I think it would be better if I left." The moment they heard that, Enoch and Caden both behaved themselves at once. They hurriedly started apologizing. "Sorry, we'll be quiet." Caden immediately added, "I won't do anything either. Please don't go." He pointed to his cheek and asked the girl for a kiss in exchange for going hunting. Caden, who had only just snuck an attack on Floan the night before, started messing around again the moment he found an opportunity. Early the next morning, as soon as Caden woke up, he saw the girl making a wooden frame. He watched her quietly for a while, then suddenly smiled and asked, "Margaret, is there anything you need me to do?" Floan didn't react at first to what he meant by something to do. "I want to move my body a little. If there's nothing else, I'll go hunt monsters." Only then did she suddenly realize that Caden probably still didn't know he could regulate his magic through physical exercise. He was just instinctively trying to find something to do. She patted the dust from her hands and walked over to him. "Hunting monsters is dangerous for you, and dangerous for us too. For now on, why don't you hunt wild animals instead? What do you think?" Caden froze. "Margaret, I'm talking about something that needs to be done right now." "Hunting is something that needs to be done right now, too. Either way, it's physical activity. Why don't you take it over?" "Huh, you just think this is a good chance to use me as cheap labor, don't you? So you figured it out." Caden exaggeratedly shrugged, sounding helpless. "Since I'm the one who asked first, I guess I'll fall for it." But his eyes suddenly fixed on Floan's face. Then he bent down closer and pointed to his own cheek. "Kiss me here." When the girl only looked at him speechlessly, he urged her again. "Margaret, hurry up," just as Floan was about to refuse. A large hand suddenly shoved him away. Enoch stepped between them, his tone icy. "Roade, haven't you been talking a little too much since yesterday? Do you want that mouth of yours to become permanently unusable?" After being pushed away without warning, Caden noticed that something seemed to have been smeared across his face. His expression changed instantly. A trace of madness glinted in his scarlet eyes. Floan's heart tightened. Caden, whose emotions were on the verge of spiraling out of control, and Enoch, who went berserk at the sight of blood, were about to collide. That would be a complete disaster. Wait, she rushed forward and separated them. She pressed her finger to her own lips, then gently touched the edge of Caden's lips with her fingertip. Caden, who had been on the verge of exploding just moments ago, froze instantly where he stood, covering his mouth with a look of utter disbelief. The girl waved her hand. All right now, but don't misunderstand. I'm not doing this because I like you. Now hurry up and go hunting. Smiling, Caden brushed the corner of his lips, then happily bade her farewell. Margaret, I'll be right back. Completely opposite to the ecstatic Caden, Enoch looked like he was about to explode with anger. He let out a long breath. Margaret, before he could finish, the girl cut him off first. I almost forgot. I need to go catch fish. Enoch, relight the fire. Okay. Enoch watched the girl's back, and in the end could only let out a helpless sigh. Being caught between two men was truly exhausting. But right now, without her there, no one could stop Enoch when he flared up, and no one could steady Caden's unstable emotions. But why wasn't Enoch meeting up with Diego? Maybe it would be better if he met the heroine sooner. But then she remembered the things the two men had said to her not long ago. Margaret, I've started to become interested in you too. No matter what the reason was at first, my feelings now are real. So I should be the one to decide what to do with these feelings. Why? Why did they have to say such upsetting things? Ugh, it would almost be better if they had just confessed outright. Then she could have rejected them with a clear conscience. She flung the fish she had caught onto the bank. Get it together. This isn't the time to think about that. Survival matters most. Just as she was thinking this, a rustling sound suddenly came from the grass, not far away. Floan became instantly alert and hurled the fish spear in her hand. With a miserable scream, Floan looked closely and found that it was Rujiv. He collapsed to the ground in terror. He was pinned under the archbishop's foot, all because the man's tone toward the girl had been too rough. Rujiv, who had almost been accidentally castrated by Floan, was now immediately threatened with death by Caden as well. A little while earlier, Floan had gone alone to the river to catch fish. Then a rustling sound came from the grass in the distance. She instantly became alert and raised her hand, throwing the fish spear hard. With a scream, Rujiv collapsed to the ground in fright. What are you doing, Lady Floan? What? I thought it was a wild animal from the mountains. Who told you to skulk around like that? Who's skulking around? When he saw her reach out to pull out the fish spear, the man shuddered again. It took him quite a while to calm down. Are you really catching fish? Floan blinked and nodded lightly. How is that possible? Lady Floan is hunting? Even a passing devil would laugh out loud hearing that. An extremely displeased voice sounded from behind them. Who are you calling a peeping Tom? Rujiv looked shocked. Your Highness the Crown Prince? Enoch's sharp gaze swept toward Rujiv. Long time no see, Archbishop. If you value your life, you'd better shut your mouth right now. Rujiv instantly clapped a hand over his mouth, his face full of disbelief. The girl thought to herself, so Diego never told his companions that he had been meeting Enoch regularly. That was understandable. After all, in the original story, Diego had always wanted to monopolize the Saintess. Your Highness, why are you here? No, why are you with that witch? What exactly did she do to you? I knew something was wrong ever since you asked me to make a love potion. Anyone who tries to manipulate other people's hearts, that easily can't possibly be normal. Rujiv turned his spear toward her again. You witch, explain what's going on. Seeing that Enoch looked ready to tear Rujiv apart, Floan hurried forward to stop him. But before Enoch could even move, the man had already shut up. With a vicious expression, Caden stomped Rujiv to the ground. Since a moment ago, you pig have been yapping nonstop. I already hate priests the most. Do you have a death wish? Mages and the clergy had long-standing grudges throughout history. And besides, Caden himself had once been taken by the temple as a child, reduced to a sacrificial victim in cruel experiments. Just a second ago, the man had still been smiling. Killing intent instantly radiated from him. Did you crawl all the way over here just to die by my hand? Rujiv glared at Caden just as furiously. You filthy mage. Caden sneered. Listen to yourself. In the original story, mages were no different from modern-day scientists. They were obsessed with all kinds of research, and as long as it was for research, they would never refuse even human experimentation. And the temple? It conducted shady experiments in secret as well, while pretending to be pure and holy on the surface, even turning around to condemn mages. No wonder the mages hated those hypocritical priests even more. Margaret Floan let out a helpless sigh. And of all things, these two natural enemies had run into each other. The two kept arguing without end, and it looked like they were about to come to blows. Margaret Floan suddenly stepped in to stop them, and both men froze mid-motion. She raised the flare gun in her hand and aimed it at Rujev. You know what this is, right? She lightly mimed pulling the trigger. Oomph. It brought back a very recent memory for Rujev. He knew just how dangerous that thing was. His face instantly went pale. Miss Floan, calm down. If you know, then shut up. Hands up, before I shoot. Rujev immediately raised both hands obediently. The girl smiled with satisfaction. Finally, some peace. The man gritted his teeth and cursed inwardly. She really was a witch. But why are you here alone? She remembered that Rujev had been traveling with Joanna's group. Rujev hurriedly looked away and started mumbling. Then a sudden, loud growl from his stomach rudely cut off the conversation. The atmosphere, tense enough to draw swords just moments ago, instantly turned strange and awkward. Rujev's face flushed bright red as he endured the humiliation. In a small voice, he said, I was looking for something to eat.